In the Woods, by David Eden. Chapter 1. Echoes of the Past. Sarah Blackwood's boots crunched on the gravel path as she patrolled the quiet trails of Olympic National Park. The air was thick with the earthy scent of moss and decaying leaves, and the towering trees overhead filtered the pale sunlight into a soft, diffused glow. After 2 decades, this forest still held a haunting familiarity for her. Sarah passed the familiar landmarks, the gnarled, twisted roots of the ancient cedars, the babbling creek that meandered through the ferns, the weathered signpost pointing the way to the Hoh rainforest. Each step stirred memories she had long buried, memories of her sister Emily's last fateful journey into these woods. The anniversary of Emily's disappearance was only a few weeks away, and the approaching full moon had Sarah on high alert. Strange occurrences tended to manifest during that time, when the veil between the mortal world and the unseen realm grew thin. Sarah clenched her jaw, refusing to dwell on the past. Her job now was to protect this forest and its visitors, no matter the cost. As Sarah rounded a bend, a figure emerged from the mist, waving frantically. It was Ranger Daisy Chen, her eyes wide with alarm. "Sarah, you need to come quick. We've got a situation at the Hoh Visitor Center." Sarah picked up her pace, adrenaline surging. What happened? A hiker just came in, rambling about strange lights in the forest. He said people are going missing. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Missing hikers, lights in the woods. It was all too familiar. She broke into a jog, pushing past the undergrowth, Daisy at her heels. The Hoh rainforest never changed, but perhaps the darkness that had once claimed her sister had returned. Chapter 2. Vanishing Point. By the time Sarah and Daisy reached the Hoh Visitor Center, a small crowd had gathered. Among them was the distraught hiker, his clothes damp and streaked with mud. Sarah recognized him as Martin Grayson, a frequent visitor to the park. "Martin, what happened?" Sarah asked, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. Martin's eyes were wild, his voice trembling. "The lights, Sarah. I saw them. Floating orbs of blue-green light just drifting between the trees. And then my friends. They just vanished. I heard their screams echo through the fog and then nothing." He covered his face with shaking hands. Sarah exchanged a grim look with Daisy. This was too similar to the circumstances surrounding Emily's disappearance. She turned to the small crowd, raising her voice to be heard. "All right, everyone, I need you to stay calm. Daisy, call the sheriff's office and request backup. We've got a missing person situation on our hands." As Daisy hurried away, Sarah placed a reassuring hand on Martin's arm. "Tell me exactly where you last saw your friends. We'll get a search party organized immediately." Over the next few hours, the situation only grew more dire. 2 campers from Bogachiel State Park had also vanished without a trace, their tent left intact and their belongings untouched. Sarah coordinated the search efforts, her mind racing with possibilities. Could it really be the same unseen force that had claimed her sister all those years ago? As darkness fell, Sarah found herself standing alone on the edge of the Hoh rainforest, staring into the impenetrable blackness. The full moon cast an eerie glow through the mist, and Sarah shuddered, remembering the way the strange lights had danced between the trees. Somewhere out there, people were in grave danger, and she was the only one who knew the truth, or at least the terrible suspicion that gnawed at her. Chapter 3. Reluctant Guardian. The next morning, Sarah was summoned to the Forks police station, where a gruff-looking detective was waiting for her. He introduced himself as Jack Harper, a recent transfer from the city. "Ranger Blackwood," he said, leaning back in his chair and eyeing her with a skeptical expression. "Care to explain what the hell is going on in your forest?" Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for the inevitable skepticism. "Detective, I wish I could give you a simple explanation, but the truth is I'm not entirely sure. What I do know is that people are disappearing and the circumstances are highly unusual." Jack scoffed. "Unusual? That's one way to put it. We've got 2 missing campers, a hysterical hiker claiming he saw floating lights, and not a single shred of evidence to go on. Forgive me if I'm a little skeptical of the supernatural angle." Sarah understood his resistance. She had once been in his shoes, dismissing the more fantastical elements of the cases she investigated. But after what had happened to Emily, she knew better. "Detective, I know it sounds crazy, but I've seen these things before. 20 years ago, my sister vanished in these woods, and the circumstances were nearly identical. The strange lights, the sudden disappearances. It's all connected, I'm sure of it. Jack studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. All right, Ranger Blackwood, I'm listening. But I'll need more than just your word if we're going to crack this case. Sarah nodded, already formulating a plan. Then let's start our investigation at the Ho Visitor Center. There may be clues there that can shed some light on what we're dealing with. As they made their way to the trailhead, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The darkness that had once claimed her sister was stirring once more, and she knew she would have to confront it head-on. Chapter 4. Keeper of Secrets. The Ho Visitor Center was a bustling hub of activity, with park rangers and local law enforcement scouring the area for any evidence. Sarah and Detective Harper were greeted by Ranger Daisy Chen, who had been tasked with coordinating the search efforts. Anything new? Sarah asked, her gaze scanning the cluster of activity. Daisy shook her head, her brow furrowed in frustration. Nothing tangible. The only lead we have is Martin Grayson's account, but even he's struggling to make sense of what he saw. Jack cleared his throat, drawing Daisy's attention. Ranger Chen, is there anyone else we should be talking to? Someone who might have more insight into the unusual occurrences in this area? Daisy's eyes widened and she glanced at Sarah. Well, there is one person you could try. Evelyn Marsh, the local historian. She's been studying the folklore and history of this region for decades. If anyone would know more about the strange phenomena in the Ho rainforest, it would be her. Sarah nodded. Then that's where we need to start. Evelyn might be able to provide some much-needed context for what we're dealing with here. They made their way to the Forks Timber Museum, where Evelyn Marsh presided over the town's historical records. The elderly woman greeted them with a warm smile, though her eyes held a glimmer of concern. Ranger Blackwood, Detective Harper. I've been expecting you. Evelyn gestured for them to follow her deeper into the archives. I'm afraid I have some rather unsettling news to share about the disappearances in the Ho rainforest. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What do you know, Evelyn? The old woman's expression grew somber. It seems the forest's ancient guardians have awakened once more. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Mist. Evelyn led Sarah and Detective Harper to a secluded corner of the Forks Timber Museum, where a large, weathered map of the Olympic Peninsula hung on the wall. She traced a fingertip along the dense forested areas, her brow creased in contemplation. For centuries, this land has been the domain of an ancient druidic cult known as the Circle of Eternal Twilight. They believed it was their duty to maintain the balance between the mortal world and the unseen realm of spirits and elementals that dwell within these woods. Jack leaned forward, his skepticism still evident. So you're telling us these so-called guardians are responsible for the disappearances? Evelyn nodded solemnly. According to the legends, the circle would perform rituals at the solstices and equinoxes, offering sacrifices to appease the forest spirits. But every 2 decades, when a rare celestial event occurs, the veil between worlds grows thin, and the spirits become hungry. Sarah felt a knot forming in the pit of her stomach. The disappearances, the strange lights, it all fits. This has happened before, hasn't it? I'm afraid so, Evelyn replied. The last time was over 20 years ago. Your sister's disappearance was not the first, Ranger Blackwood, nor will it be the last unless we can find a way to stop the cycle. Jack shook his head, his expression skeptical. So you're telling us that these forest spirits are abducting people? That's a pretty tall tale even for a small-town historian. I know it sounds unbelievable, Detective, Evelyn said, her voice tinged with urgency. But the evidence is there if you know where to look. The vanishing trails, the whispering trees, these are all signs of the spirit's influence. And the disappearances always occur during the full moon. Sarah placed a hand on Jack's arm, meeting his gaze with a pleading look. Detective, I know how this sounds, but I've seen these things firsthand. If we don't act soon, more people are going to vanish, just like my sister. Jack held her stare for a long moment, weighing her words. Finally, he sighed and nodded. All right, Ranger Blackwood, lead the way. Let's see what else this forest has to hide. Chapter 6. Buried Truths. As Sarah and Detective Harper made their way into the Hoh rainforest, the air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The towering trees cast long shadows across the mossy trail, and Sarah couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that the forest itself was watching them. "So, let me get this straight," Jack said, his voice low as they picked their way through the underbrush. "You think these forest spirits, or whatever they are responsible for the disappearances, and you've seen them before, with your own sister?" Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of the vanishing trails Evelyn had mentioned. "I know it sounds crazy, but I've never been able to shake the feeling that Emily's disappearance was connected to something supernatural. And the more I learn about the history of this place, the more it all starts to make sense." Jack let out a sigh. "All right, I'll play along. But I'm going to need some solid evidence if I'm going to convince the rest of the department that we're dealing with something more than a standard missing persons case." "That's why we're here," Sarah replied, pausing to examine a peculiar marking on the trunk of a nearby tree. Evelyn said the vanishing trails and the whispering trees might hold the answers we're looking for. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew colder and the mist thickened, obscuring their vision. Sarah could feel the weight of the forest pressing in around them, as if the very trees were scrutinizing their every move. Suddenly, Jack stiffened, his hand reaching for his holster. "Did you hear that?" Sarah strained her ears, and faintly she could make out a strange whispering sound, like the breath of 1,000 unseen voices. She took a step closer, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns carved into the bark. "I think we just found our first clue." Chapter 7. Into the Deep. Over the next few days, Sarah and Detective Harper delved deeper into the mysteries of the Hoh rainforest, their investigation slowly piecing together a disturbing picture. The vanishing trails, as Evelyn had described, were real. Paths that seemed to shift and disappear, leaving those who ventured too far into the woods disoriented and lost. And the whispering trees were even more unsettling. As Sarah and Jack explored the forest, they encountered ancient, gnarled trunks that seemed to murmur and sigh, as if the very spirits of the woods were communicating with them. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, observed by unseen entities that dwelled within the shadows. "This is insane," Jack muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration as he carefully documented their findings. "Everything Evelyn told us seems to be true. But how the hell do we prove any of this to the rest of the department?" Sarah knew Jack's skepticism was understandable. She had once been in his shoes, dismissing the supernatural as mere superstition. But after Emily's disappearance, she had been forced to confront the harsh reality that there were forces at work in this world that defied rational explanation. "We have to keep looking," she said, her voice laced with determination. "There has to be more evidence, some way to unravel the true nature of what's happening here." As they continued their exploration, Sarah couldn't help but be drawn to the towering ancient trees that loomed over them. There was an undeniable power to this place, a primal energy that seemed to hum and thrum beneath the surface. And the more she delved into it, the more she felt a connection, a kinship that she had never fully understood. "Jack," she said, her gaze fixed on the shifting patterns of light and shadow, "I think we're getting closer to the truth. But I also think this forest has been waiting for us." Chapter 8. The Veil Lifts. The night of the full moon dawned, and with it a growing sense of unease that permeated the small town of Forks. Sarah and Detective Harper had spent the past few days piecing together the clues, but their investigation had only raised more questions than answers. As they made their way to the Sol Duke Hot Springs Resort, the eerie fog that had blanketed the area seemed to grow thicker, obscuring their vision. Sarah could feel the weight of the forest's presence, as if the very trees were watching their every move. "This is too quiet," Jack murmured, his hand resting on the grip of his service weapon. "I don't like it." Sarah nodded, her own senses on high alert. "Stay close. I have a feeling we're about to discover something we're not prepared for." As they approached the resort, the first signs of the unfolding tragedy became apparent. Abandoned luggage and scattered personal belongings littered the parking lot, and the main building stood eerily silent, its windows dark. "Damn it!" Jack cursed, quickening his pace. "We're too late." They burst through the front doors, only to be greeted by a scene of utter chaos. Guests were huddled in the lobby, their faces pale with terror. A woman was sobbing uncontrollably, her words barely coherent. "The lights! They came for them, took them all just like that!" Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Where did the lights go?" she demanded, gripping the woman's shoulders. The woman's eyes were wild with fear. "Into the forest. They just vanished." Sarah turned to Jack, her expression grim. "We need to get a search team out there immediately. Whatever's happening, it's escalating." But as they moved to organize the rescue effort, Sarah felt a strange sensation wash over her. The world seemed to shift, the edges of her vision blurring. Suddenly, a vision appeared before her, a towering, ethereal figure looming in the shadows. "Sarah Blackwood," a deep, resonant voice whispered, echoing through her mind. "The time has come. The forest's hunger must be appeased." Sarah felt the breath catch in her throat, a sense of dread and recognition gripping her very soul. This was no mere hallucination. It was a harbinger of things to come, a warning from the ancient spirits that had claimed her sister all those years ago. The final confrontation was drawing near. Chapter 9. Hidden Realm. In the aftermath of the Solduke tragedy, Sarah and Detective Harper found themselves at a loss. The disappearances had escalated, and the fear that gripped the small town was palpable. Yet, despite their best efforts, they had uncovered precious few leads. "We need to go back to the forest," Sarah said, her voice tinged with a quiet desperation. "There has to be something we're missing, some clue that can point us to where these people are being taken." Jack regarded her with a mixture of skepticism and concern. "Blackwood, I get that you have some kind of personal stake in this, but we're flying blind here. What makes you so sure we'll find anything in that damn forest?" Sarah met his gaze, her eyes resolute. "Because I've been there before, Jack. I know what it's capable of." She paused, weighing her words. "And because I think I'm the only one who can truly understand what's happening." Jack studied her for a long moment, his brow furrowed in contemplation. Finally, he sighed and nodded. "All right, Blackwood, lead the way, but I want every step of this documented. You hear me? If we're going to take down whatever's out there, I need solid evidence." Sarah felt a surge of relief. "I understand. Let's get started." As they made their way back into the Hoh rainforest, the air grew thick with an unsettling energy. The usual sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves seemed muted, as if the very forest was holding its breath. Sarah felt a familiar tug, a pull towards the heart of the woods that she had long tried to ignore. "This way," she said, veering off the main trail and into the dense undergrowth. Jack followed close behind, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. They pressed on, the forest growing ever more dense and impenetrable. Roots and vines seemed to reach out, as if trying to impede their progress. Sarah could feel the weight of the trees, the watchful gaze of unseen presences. Suddenly, Jack stumbled, nearly losing his footing. "What the hell?" he muttered, shining his light on the ground. Sarah peered closer, her breath catching in her throat. The trail had simply vanished, replaced by a yawning chasm that seemed to lead deeper underground. She could sense the energy emanating from the darkness, a pull that beckoned them forward. "The vanishing trails," she whispered, her heart pounding. "We've found the entrance to the spirit realm." Jack looked at her, his expression a mix of disbelief and trepidation. "You can't be serious. You want us to just jump down there?" Sarah met his gaze, her resolve unwavering. "If we want to find the missing people and stop whatever's happening in this forest, we have to. We're running out of time, Jack." With a deep breath, she stepped forward, letting the darkness swallow her. Jack hesitated for only a moment before following, plunging them both into the unknown. Chapter 10. Ancient Hunger. The descent into the spirit realm was disorienting, the world around them warping and shifting with each step. Sarah felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the very air was alive with an ancient primal energy. As they emerged into a vast, cavernous space, Sarah's eyes widened in awe and trepidation. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings and glowing symbols, and the air hummed with a palpable power. "What is this place?" Jack whispered, his voice hushed with a mixture of wonder and unease. Sarah reached out, tracing her fingers along the carved runes. This must be the heart of the Druidic Circle's ancient rituals, the portal between our world and the realm of the forest spirits. A chill ran down her spine as she recalled Evelyn's words. The Circle of Eternal Twilight had once performed sacrifices here, to appease the ravenous hunger of the spirits that dwelled within the woods. "We need to be careful," she murmured, her gaze scanning the eerie shadows for any sign of movement. "This is their domain, and they're not going to let us interfere without a fight." As if in response to her words, a faint rustling sound echoed through the cavern, followed by a chilling, otherworldly whisper. Sarah felt her heart race, a primal fear gripping her. "Sarah Blackwood," the voice murmured, its tone both alluring and menacing. "The forest has been waiting for you." Suddenly, a flickering light appeared in the distance, its bluish-green hue casting an unearthly glow. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat, a surge of recognition washing over her. "The Lure Wisps," she breathed, her hand instinctively reaching for the revolver at her side. "Jack, we need to get out of here now." But even as the words left her lips, the lights began to drift closer, their ethereal dance drawing them deeper into the heart of the ancient ritual chamber. Sarah knew they had no choice but to confront the ancient spirits that had claimed so many lives, including her own sisters. The final reckoning was at hand. Chapter 11. False Light. As the Lure Wisps drifted closer, their otherworldly glow casting flickering shadows across the cavernous ritual chamber, Sarah and Jack braced themselves for the confrontation to come. "Stay close to me," Sarah whispered, her grip tightening on her revolver. "These spirits feed on fear and desperation. We can't let them get the upper hand." Jack nodded, his own weapon drawn as he scanned the surrounding darkness for any sign of movement. "So what's the plan, Blackwood? How do we stop these things?" Sarah's brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm not sure, to be honest. Evelyn said the druids used to perform rituals to appease the spirits, but I don't think we have the same kind of power or knowledge." As the Lure Wisps drew nearer, their eerie glow intensifying, Sarah felt a strange tugging sensation, as if the very air was trying to pull her towards them. She fought the urge to step forward to let the lights envelop her. "Jack, get back!" she yelled, sensing the danger. "They're trying to lure us in." But even as the detective scrambled to obey, a new threat emerged from the shadows. A swarm of spectral, bird-like creatures, their talons gleaming in the ethereal light. Sarah opened fire, her bullets cutting through the creatures with surprising effectiveness, but more seemed to take their place. "What the hell are those things?" Jack shouted, his own weapon blazing. "I don't know, but they're not friendly," Sarah replied, ducking as one of the creatures swooped down towards her. "We need to find a way out of here fast." As they fought their way through the onslaught, Sarah couldn't help but feel a nagging sense of doubt. This wasn't the same threat she had faced all those years ago. Something else was at work here. Something that didn't quite fit the pattern of the ancient forest spirits. "Blackwood, look out!" Jack's warning came too late as one of the creatures lashed out, its talons tearing into Sarah's arm. She cried out in pain, her revolver clattering to the ground. In the commotion, the Lure Wisps seemed to flicker and fade, their allure dissipating. Sarah felt a surge of relief, but the respite was short-lived. "We need to get out of here," she gasped, clutching her injured arm. "This isn't the threat we're looking for. We've been led astray." As they retreated, Sarah couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that the forest's true hunger was still lurking, waiting to claim its next victims. Chapter 12. Price of Knowledge. The journey back to the surface was arduous, with Sarah's injured arm slowing their progress. As they emerged from the vanishing trail, Jack immediately called for medical assistance, his expression a mixture of concern and frustration. "Damn it, Blackwood, what the hell was that back there?" he demanded, his eyes searching her face for answers. Sarah winced as the paramedic tended to her wound, her mind racing. "I'm not sure, but I don't think those creatures were the true threat. They were a distraction, something to lure us off the trail." Jack shook his head, his brow furrowed. "So what are we dealing with then? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like we just got our asses handed to us by a bunch of supernatural birdwatchers." Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but suddenly her vision began to blur, the world around her growing hazy and indistinct. She felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the very energy of the forest was flowing through her. What's happening? Jack asked, his voice laced with alarm. I don't know, Sarah stammered, her eyes fluttering as the sensations intensified. It's like the forest is trying to communicate with me. And then, without warning, darkness consumed her. When Sarah finally regained consciousness, she found herself lying in a familiar setting. The Kalaloch Lodge, a remote coastal retreat tucked away on the edge of Olympic National Park. Beside her, Jack hovered anxiously, his expression etched with concern. "Welcome back," he said, his voice terse. "You've been out for hours. What the hell happened back there?" Sarah blinked, her mind still reeling from the strange experience. I'm not sure, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I think the forest is trying to show me something. Something important. Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. Well, whatever it is, it better be worth it. Because right now, we're no closer to solving this case than we were before. And with more people going missing, we're running out of time. Sarah nodded, wincing as she tried to sit up. I know, Jack. But I think the answer lies in understanding the forest's connection to my family, to Emily. With renewed determination, she pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the protests of her weary body. The forest had chosen her for a reason, and she was determined to uncover its secrets, no matter the cost. Chapter 13. Hunter and Hunted. As Sarah and Jack made their way back to Forks, the town seemed to have an uneasy air about it. The disappearances had shaken the community, and the residents were on edge, jumping at the slightest sound. This is bad, Jack muttered, his gaze sweeping the streets. People are scared, and they're looking for answers. We need to give them something. Fast. Sarah nodded, her mind still whirling with the implications of her strange experience in the forest. I know, but we can't rush this, Jack. Whatever's happening in those woods, it's ancient and powerful. We need to tread carefully. They headed to the police station where a harried-looking Ranger Daisy Chen greeted them. Sarah, Detective, thank God you're back. The mayor's been breathing down my neck, wanting to know what the hell we're doing to stop these disappearances. We're doing everything we can, Daisy, Sarah assured her, placing a comforting hand on the younger woman's shoulder. But this is unlike anything we've dealt with before. We need to be cautious and focus on gathering as much information as possible. Daisy nodded, her brow furrowed. Well, you're in luck. Evelyn Marsh has been pestering us all day to come talk to her. She says she has some new information that might help. Sarah felt a surge of hope. Then that's where we need to go. Evelyn might be able to shed some light on what we encountered in the forest. As they headed to the Forks Timber Museum, Sarah couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that they were being watched. The streets seemed empty, the shadows elongated, and the very air seemed to crackle with an unseen energy. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye, and Sarah froze, her heart pounding. There, in the distance, a faint blue-green glow was drifting through the mist. Jack, she breathed, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. The detective followed her gaze, his own expression hardening. The Lure Wisps. They've found us. In that moment, Sarah knew that the forest's hunger had not been sated. They were the prey, and the hunt had begun. Chapter 14. Broken Circle. As the Lure Wisps drifted closer, Sarah and Jack broke into a sprint, their feet pounding against the pavement. The ethereal lights seemed to follow them, their ghostly dance quickening with each step. Where the hell are we going? Jack shouted, his breath ragged. The Timber Museum, Sarah replied, her voice strained. Evelyn might be able to help us, or at least give us some insight into how to stop these things. They burst through the museum's doors, slamming them shut behind them. For a moment, the Lure Wisps hovered outside, their glow pulsing and fading as if confused by the sudden barrier. We need to find Evelyn, fast, Sarah said, her gaze darting around the dimly lit interior. Over here, a voice called out, and they turned to see the elderly historian hurrying towards them, her eyes wide with alarm. Sarah, Detective, thank goodness you've made it, Evelyn said breathlessly. I've been trying to reach you. We have a serious problem. That's an understatement, Jack muttered, gesturing towards the door. Those things out there, they're not going to give up so easily. Evelyn nodded, her expression grave. "I'm afraid you're right. The Lure Wisps are only the beginning. There's someone else involved, someone who knows the true nature of the forest's power." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Who?" Evelyn's gaze flickered towards the back of the museum, where a shadowy figure was emerging from the stacks. "His name is Liam O'Connor. He's a descendant of the original druidic circle, and he's been hiding something from us all along." As the figure stepped into the light, Sarah recognized the young park worker, his usually affable demeanor now tinged with a dark intensity. "Hello, Sarah," Liam said, his voice laced with a hint of regret. "I'm afraid I've been keeping some rather unsettling secrets." Chapter 15. The Great Devouring. Sarah felt a surge of anger as Liam's words sank in. All this time, he had been withholding critical information, and people had paid the price. "What do you know, Liam?" she demanded, her hands clenched into fists. "What are you hiding?" Liam sighed, his expression weary. "The truth is, I'm a descendant of the Circle of Eternal Twilight. My ancestors were the ones who performed the rituals to appease the forest spirits, to maintain the balance between the mortal world and the realm of the unseen." Jack stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "So you're telling us that you knew about the disappearances, about the Lure Wisps, and you didn't say anything?" Liam shook his head. "It's not that simple. I've been trying to protect this town, to keep the forest's hunger at bay. But now I fear I've failed." Sarah felt a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. "The 1933 Quinault logging incident. That was your doing, wasn't it?" Liam nodded, his gaze downcast. "I couldn't let the spirits take more innocent lives, so I intervened, using my family's knowledge to disrupt the ritual. But in doing so, I only delayed the inevitable. The forest's hunger has grown stronger, and now it seeks to consume us all." Evelyn stepped forward, her usually gentle expression hardened with resolve. "Then we must act, Liam. We must find a way to stop the cycle once and for all." Sarah glanced at Jack, seeing the same determination in his eyes. "Then let's get to work. We don't have much time before the next full moon." As they pored over the ancient texts and artifacts in the museum's archives, Sarah couldn't shake the growing sense of dread. The forest's hunger was insatiable, and it had already claimed so much. This time she would have to confront it head-on, no matter the cost. Chapter 16. Darkest Hour. The days leading up to the next full moon were a blur of frantic research and preparation. Sarah, Jack, Evelyn, and Liam worked tirelessly, piecing together the fragments of the Circle of Eternal Twilight's history, searching for any clue that could help them stop the impending disaster. And all the while, the disappearances continued. Families were torn apart, the town's grief palpable. Sarah knew they were running out of time. Finally, the night of the full moon arrived, and they gathered at the entrance to the Ho rainforest, their faces etched with determination. "This is it," Sarah said, her gaze sweeping over the small group. "We've got one shot at this. Are we ready?" Liam nodded, his expression solemn. "As ready as we'll ever be. The ritual chamber in the spirit realm is the key. That's where we need to confront the forest's hunger once and for all." Jack shifted his weight, his hand gripping the handle of his sidearm. "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go kick some supernatural ass." With a deep breath, they stepped into the forest, the Lure Wisps already beginning to materialize in the distance. Sarah felt a familiar tug, the same pull she had experienced before. A siren call from the ancient spirits that dwelled within the woods. As they ventured deeper, the trees seemed to close in around them, the mist swirling and obscuring their vision. Sarah could feel the energy of the forest pulsing, like the beating of a primordial heart. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the gloom, its features obscured by shadow. Sarah tensed, her hand reaching for her weapon, but Liam stepped forward, his expression pleading. "Jack, wait," he said, his voice low. "This is my burden to bear." The shadowy figure moved closer, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the familiar face. It was Jack's partner, Officer Daisy Chen. But something was not right. Daisy's eyes were vacant, her movements unnaturally fluid, as if she were being puppeted by some unseen force. "The forest's hunger demands a sacrifice," Daisy intoned, her voice echoing with an unearthly resonance. You have come to offer yourselves, and the circle will be complete." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Daisy, fight it!" she shouted, her heart racing. "This isn't you!" But Daisy's expression remained impassive, her gaze fixed on Liam. "The time has come, descendant of the circle. You know what must be done." Liam's face was etched with anguish, his hands trembling. I can't. Not again." Suddenly Daisy lunged forward, her movements fueled by a preternatural strength. Sarah and Jack scrambled to react, but they were too slow. Daisy's hands closed around Liam's throat, her grip unyielding. "Then the forest will take you all," she hissed, her voice a cacophony of discordant tones. Sarah watched in horror as Liam's struggles grew weaker, his eyes pleading for help. She knew they had to act, but the thought of losing another person to the forest's ravenous hunger was too much to bear. "Jack!" she cried, her voice desperate. "We have to stop her!" But as they moved to intervene, a blinding light flashed through the trees, and the world seemed to shift and distort around them. Sarah felt the ground disappear beneath her feet, and then everything went dark. When she finally opened her eyes, Sarah found herself alone, surrounded by the eerie silence of the forest. Jack and Liam were nowhere to be seen, and Daisy's lifeless body lay crumpled on the ground. Sarah felt a surge of despair, the weight of her failure crushing her. The forest had claimed another victim, and she was powerless to stop it. As she sank to her knees, the tears finally began to fall, and Sarah knew that she had to find a way to break the cycle, no matter the cost. Chapter 17. Ancestral Calling. In the aftermath of the devastating confrontation in the Hoh rainforest, Sarah found herself adrift, consumed by a sense of overwhelming guilt and hopelessness. Jack and Liam were gone, swallowed by the forest's ravenous hunger. And Daisy? Sarah shuddered, the memory of her friend's lifeless body seared into her mind. She had failed them all, just as she had failed her sister all those years ago. Seeking solace, Sarah retreated to the Kalaloch Lodge, the coastal retreat where she had once found solace as a child. The rhythmic crashing of the waves against the rocky shoreline was a soothing balm, but it did little to ease the turmoil in her heart. As she sat alone on the weathered porch, gazing out at the vast, turbulent ocean, Sarah felt a stirring within her, a connection to something ancient and primal. It was as if the very bones of the earth were calling to her, urging her to remember her true purpose. Closing her eyes, Sarah allowed herself to be consumed by the sensation, letting it wash over her like a tidal wave. Fragments of memories long buried began to surface. Fleeting glimpses of her childhood, of her time in the forest, of her sister's final fateful journey. And then, like a bolt of lightning, the realization hit her. The Blackwood family was not just caught in the thrall of the forest's hunger. They were inextricably linked to it. For generations, they had been the guardians, the protectors tasked with maintaining the delicate balance between the mortal world and the realm of the unseen. Sarah's eyes snapped open, a renewed sense of purpose igniting within her. She knew what she had to do, the burden she had been destined to bear. The forest had chosen her, and she would not fail it again. Determined, Sarah rose from her seat, her gaze fixed on the looming tree line in the distance. The final confrontation was drawing near, and this time she would be ready. Chapter 18. Gathering Storm. With a renewed sense of purpose, Sarah returned to Forks, her mind already whirring with a plan of action. She knew that she couldn't face the forest's hunger alone, not this time. She would need allies, people who were willing to put everything on the line to stop the cycle of disappearances once and for all. Her first stop was the Forks Timber Museum, where Evelyn Marsh greeted her with a mixture of relief and trepidation. "Sarah, thank goodness you're all right," the elderly historian said, embracing her warmly. "When you disappeared, we feared the worst." Sarah squeezed Evelyn's hand, her gaze resolute. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I should have been stronger, more prepared. But now, I know what we need to do." Evelyn's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "The forest has chosen me, Evelyn," Sarah replied, her voice tinged with a newfound confidence. "I'm the guardian, the one who must confront the hunger that has claimed so many lives, including my sister's." Evelyn's eyes widened with a mix of awe and concern. "Then you must be ready, child. The powers you're about to face are ancient and unforgiving. Sarah nodded. I know. That's why I need your help, and the help of anyone else who's willing to stand against the darkness. Together, they began to assemble their team. Ranger Thomas Redwood, the grizzled woodsman with an intimate knowledge of the forest's secrets, agreed to lend his expertise. And to Sarah's surprise, even the skeptical Detective Jack Harper's partner, Daisy Chen, expressed a desire to make amends for her actions, vowing to do whatever it took to make things right. As they pored over ancient texts and artifacts, piecing together the rituals and rites that the Circle of Eternal Twilight had once used to maintain the balance, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. The weight of the responsibility she was about to undertake was staggering, but she knew that she had no choice. The forest's hunger had to be stopped, once and for all. Chapter 19. Heart of Darkness. The night of the full moon dawned, and Sarah, Evelyn, Thomas, and Daisy found themselves standing at the entrance to the Hoh rainforest, the air thick with a palpable sense of foreboding. The Lure Wisps were already visible in the distance, their eerie glow casting an otherworldly light across the misty landscape. Remember, we must be careful, Evelyn cautioned, her voice low. The forest's spirits will try to deceive us, to lure us off the path. We must remain focused and true to our purpose. Sarah nodded, her grip tightening on the ancient relic she had retrieved from the museum's archives. I know. And I won't let them claim any more victims, not this time. With renewed determination, they set off into the forest, the lure wisps flickering and pulsing in the periphery of their vision. The deeper they ventured, the more the forest seemed to come alive, the very trees and undergrowth twisting and writhing as if possessed by some unseen force. Daisy shuddered, her eyes darting nervously. I can feel it, the forest's hunger. It's like it's trying to pull me in, to consume me. Thomas placed a weathered hand on her shoulder, his expression grave. Stay strong, girl. The forest feeds on fear and desperation. We can't let it break us. As they pressed on, the world around them began to distort, the very fabric of reality seeming to warp and shift. Evelyn's voice echoed through the haze, her words tinged with a sense of wonder and trepidation. The veil between worlds is thinning. We're approaching the heart of the ritual chamber, the wellspring of the forest's power. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to falter. This was her destiny, her burden to bear. She would not fail, not this time. Stepping forward, she felt the energy of the forest pulse and thrum, as if the very earth was welcoming her. And in the distance, a towering, ethereal figure began to take shape, its presence both alluring and terrifying. The time has come, Sarah Blackwood, a deep, resonant voice whispered, echoing through her mind. The forest's hunger must be appeased. Chapter 20. Mirrors of the Soul. As the ethereal figure materialized before them, Sarah felt a sense of dread and recognition wash over her. This was the Spirit Elder, the ancient guardian of the forest's power, and it had been waiting for her. You have returned, descendant of the Blackwood line, the Spirit Elder intoned, its voice a haunting symphony of whispers and echoes. The forest has chosen you to fulfill your destiny. Sarah steeled her resolve, her grip tightening on the relic in her hand. I won't let you take any more lives. The cycle of sacrifice ends here. The Spirit Elder's form seemed to flicker and shift, its features morphing into something both captivating and horrifying. You speak of sacrifice, child, but you know nothing of the true nature of the forest's hunger. It is a primal, unending need that can only be sated through the offering of souls. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. The balance must be maintained, Spirit Elder. The forest cannot be allowed to consume indiscriminately. There must be a way to appease it without resorting to such dark means. The Spirit Elder's gaze turned towards Evelyn, its eyes burning with an ancient, otherworldly power. The balance has already been disrupted, mortal. The forest's hunger grows with each passing cycle, and only the ultimate sacrifice can restore it. Suddenly, the ground began to rumble, and Sarah felt a strange, tugging sensation, as if the very earth was trying to pull her forward. She glanced around, her eyes widening as she realized that they were surrounded by a series of luminescent, swirling pools. The essence pools that Evelyn had described, gateways to the deepest recesses of the forest's power. "What is this?" Daisy asked, her voice laced with a mix of awe and trepidation. "The forest's mirrors," the spirit elder replied, its voice dripping with malevolence. "Behold the true nature of your souls, mortal beings. Let your darkest fears and regrets consume you, and surrender yourselves to the forest's embrace." As Sarah stared into the shimmering pools, she felt a strange sensation wash over her, as if the forest was peeling back the layers of her psyche, exposing the deepest, most hidden parts of her being. Memories she had long buried began to surface, and she found herself reliving the anguish and guilt of her sister's disappearance, the weight of that loss threatening to consume her. Around her, the others were similarly affected, their faces contorted with a mix of terror and self-loathing as they confronted their own inner demons. Sarah knew that they were being tested, that the forest was trying to break them, to turn them against one another. But she also knew that this was the key to breaking the cycle, to finally putting an end to the forest's hunger. Steeling her resolve, she stepped forward, her gaze unwavering as she met the spirit elder's unearthly stare. "I will not surrender," she declared, her voice ringing with defiance. "This ends here." Chapter 21. Battle for Two Worlds. As Sarah faced the spirit elder, the ancient power emanating from the towering entity was palpable, a tangible force that threatened to overwhelm her. Around her, Evelyn, Thomas, and Daisy were each grappling with their own inner demons, the essence pools reflecting their deepest fears and regrets. But Sarah knew that she could not afford to be consumed by her own darkness. The fate of countless lives hung in the balance, and she was the only one who could put an end to the forest's hunger. "You cannot win, mortal," the spirit elder rumbled, its voice echoing through the cavernous chamber. "The forest's need is eternal, and only the ultimate sacrifice can appease it." Sarah steeled her resolve, her grip tightening on the ancient relic she had brought with her. "Then I will be the sacrifice, but on my own terms." Closing her eyes, she focused her mind, drawing upon the strength and wisdom of her ancestors, the Blackwood line that had been entrusted with the guardianship of the forest. She could feel the power surging through her, a connection to the very essence of the earth itself. Raising the relic high, Sarah began to chant the ancient words, her voice resonating with a primal power. The spirit elder recoiled, its form flickering and distorting as the energy of the ritual chamber began to shift and tremble. "What is this?" the spirit elder roared, its rage palpable. "You dare to challenge the forest's will?" Sarah continued her incantation, her words growing stronger and more confident. "I am the guardian, the keeper of the balance, and I will not let you consume any more souls." As the ritual reached its climax, a blinding light erupted from the relic, engulfing the chamber in a wave of pure energy. The spirit elder howled in agony, its form disintegrating as the power of the ritual tore through it. Around her, Sarah could see the others emerging from their own personal battles, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and relief. The essence pools had vanished, and the crushing weight of their inner demons had been lifted. But even as the spirit elder's presence faded, Sarah knew that the true test was yet to come. The forest's hunger would not be so easily sated, and she would have to be prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice to finally break the cycle. Steeling her resolve, she turned to her allies, her expression grim. "It's not over yet. The forest's hunger must be appeased once and for all." Chapter 22. Cycle Broken. As the blinding light from the ritual faded, Sarah and her allies found themselves standing amidst the ruins of the ancient ritual chamber, the spirit elder's presence no longer looming over them. But the sense of unease and dread that had pervaded the forest remained, a testament to the deep-rooted power that still lurked within the shadows. Sarah turned to Evelyn, her expression grave. "The spirit elder is gone, but the forest's hunger remains. We've disrupted the cycle, but it will find a way to restore the balance, won't it?" The elderly historian nodded solemnly. "Yes, child. The forest's need is primal, eternal. It will not be satisfied until the ultimate sacrifice is made." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Then that means—" Her voice trailed off, the weight of the realization settling heavily upon her. Evelyn placed a weathered hand on her arm, her eyes filled with empathy. "You understand now, don't you? The true guardianship of the forest falls to you, Sarah Blackwood." Sarah's gaze drifted to the others. Daisy, Thomas. even the remnants of Liam's presence that still lingered in the chamber. They had all played a part in this, had all been drawn into the forest's web. And now the fate of the town, of the entire region, rested squarely on her shoulders. "I have to stop the cycle," she murmured, her expression resolute. "No more sacrifices. This ends here." Stepping forward, Sarah felt the energy of the forest pulse and thrum around her, as if the very earth were welcoming her. She knew what she had to do, the path she had to take. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes, allowing herself to be consumed by the forest's power. The others watched in awe as her form began to shimmer and shift, merging with the very essence of the ancient woodland. When Sarah's eyes finally opened, they were filled with a mix of sorrow and determination. "The cycle is broken," she declared, her voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. "I am the guardian now, the bridge between the mortal world and the realm of the unseen." One by one, the trapped souls that had been claimed by the forest's hunger began to emerge, their forms shimmering and ethereal. Sarah watched as they reunited with their loved ones. The weight of their disappearances finally lifted. Among them, Sarah spotted a familiar face, her sister, Emily, her features etched with a mix of joy and anguish. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Sarah felt a surge of relief and closure, the guilt and grief that had haunted her for so long finally beginning to dissipate. "Sarah." Emily's voice was barely above a whisper, but it held a profound sense of understanding. "You've done it. You've broken the cycle." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat as she reached out, her fingers tracing the outline of her sister's spectral form. "I'm so sorry, Emily. I couldn't save you." Emily shook her head, a sad smile gracing her lips. "But you have, Sarah. By becoming the guardian, you've ensured that no one else will suffer the same fate. The forest's hunger has been appeased at long last." Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks as she pulled her sister into an embrace, the physical barriers between them no longer a hindrance. In that moment, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the burden of her guilt and failure finally shedding away. As the reunited souls began to fade, their gratitude and farewells echoing through the chamber, Sarah turned to Daisy, Thomas, and the others, her expression resolute. "The forest is mine to protect now," she said, her voice tinged with a sense of purpose. "I will be its guardian, the keeper of the balance between the mortal world and the unseen realm." Daisy stepped forward, her eyes shining with a newfound respect. "What do you need us to do, Sarah?" Sarah placed a hand on the younger woman's shoulder, her gaze sweeping over the small group. "I will need your help. All of you. The forest's hunger may be sated for now, but its influence still looms over this town, this region. We must be vigilant, ever watchful, to ensure that the cycle never begins again." Thomas nodded, his weathered features softening with a hint of pride. "You can count on us, Ranger Blackwood. We'll be here, standing with you, no matter what the forest throws our way." As they emerged from the ritual chamber, Sarah felt a sense of both trepidation and determination. The burden she now carried was immense, the responsibility of guarding the delicate balance between the mortal and spirit realms, a weight that few could comprehend, but she knew that she was not alone. The town of Forks, once the unwitting victim of the forest's hunger, would now stand as her steadfast allies, united in their quest to protect the ancient, primordial wilderness that had claimed so much. And as Sarah gazed out over the misty expanse of the Hoh rainforest, she could feel the power of the forest thrumming within her, a part of her very being. She would be its guardian, its protector for as long as she drew breath. The cycle was broken, and a new era had begun. Chapter 23. Twilight's End. In the days and weeks that followed, the town of Forks slowly began to heal, the lingering fear and unease that had once gripped the community giving way to a newfound sense of resilience and community. The disappearances had stopped, and the forest's hunger had been appeased, at least for the time being. Sarah Blackwood had become a living embodiment of the forest's guardian, her connection to the ancient woodland deepening with each passing day. She could feel the energy of the trees, the subtle shifting of the earth, the whispers of the unseen spirits that still dwelled within the shadows. As she patrolled the familiar trails, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the transformation that had taken place within her. She was no longer just a park ranger, but a conduit, a bridge between the mortal world and the realm of the unseen. The Blackwood family's legacy had finally been fulfilled, and she was the one tasked with maintaining the delicate balance. It was a responsibility that weighed heavily on her. But Sarah knew that she was not alone in her quest. The people of Forks had rallied around her, offering their support and their unwavering loyalty. Daisy, Thomas, and even the once skeptical Detective Jack Harper had all become integral parts of the team, each contributing their unique skills and perspectives to the ongoing effort. Together, they worked tirelessly, monitoring the forest's activity, preparing for any signs of the ancient hunger resurfacing. And as the seasons changed and the full moons came and went, Sarah could feel the ebb and flow of the forest's energy, the subtle shifts in the veil between the mortal and spirit realms. Yet, despite the ever-present vigilance, there were moments of peace, of connection, when Sarah could simply lose herself in the beauty and wonder of the ancient woodland. She would sit beneath the towering trees, listening to the whispers of the wind, and feel a sense of serenity wash over her. It was in these quiet moments that Sarah knew she had found her true purpose, her destiny intertwined with the very fabric of the forest itself. She was no longer just Sarah Blackwood, the small-town park ranger. She was the guardian, the protector of the delicate balance that had been disrupted for far too long. And as she gazed out over the misty expanse of the Hoh rainforest, Sarah knew that her work was far from over. The forest's hunger would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be appeased. But with the support of her allies and the power that now coursed through her veins, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The cycle had been broken, but the vigil would never end. Chapter 24. Eternal Vigil. In the years that followed, the town of Forks slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. The lingering memories of the disappearances and the forest's hunger fading into the realm of local legend. The residents went about their daily lives, their gratitude for the town's guardian unspoken but ever-present. Sarah Blackwood had become a fixture in the community, her role as the keeper of the forest's balance seamlessly woven into the fabric of everyday life. She continued to patrol the trails, her senses attuned to the slightest shift in the energy of the ancient woodland, ever vigilant for any sign of the hunger's resurgence. And while the disappearances had ceased, Sarah knew that the threat was never truly gone. The forest's power was eternal, its needs primal and insatiable. She had become the bridge, the conduit between the mortal world and the realm of the unseen, and the responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. Yet Sarah found solace in the quiet moments, the times when she could simply lose herself in the beauty and wonder of the forest. She would sit beneath the towering trees, listening to the whispers of the wind, and feel a sense of connection that transcended the physical realm. It was during these meditations that Sarah would sometimes catch glimpses of the souls she had freed, their ethereal forms flitting between the shadows, watching over the town and its inhabitants. She knew that they were at peace, no longer bound by the forest's hunger, and it filled her heart with a bittersweet sense of pride and relief. As the years passed, a new generation of Forks residents emerged, and with them came a renewed understanding and appreciation for the forest's guardianship. Sarah watched with a mixture of pride and trepidation as Daisy Chen, now a seasoned park ranger herself, took on a more active role in monitoring the forest's activity, her own connection to the ancient woodland growing stronger with each passing day. It was a comfort to Sarah, knowing that she had found worthy successors, individuals who shared her dedication to preserving the delicate balance between the mortal and spirit realms. And as the timekeepers watch, the ancient artifact that had once been passed down through her family found its way into Daisy's possession, Sarah knew that the vigil would continue, even long after she was gone. The forest's hunger would never be fully sated, its appetite eternal and insatiable. But as long as there were those willing to stand as its guardians, to protect the delicate threads that bound the two worlds together, the cycle of disappearances and sacrifice would never be repeated. And so, Sarah Blackwood continued her eternal vigil, her soul forever intertwined with the ancient primordial wilderness that had once claimed her sister, and now claimed her as its own. The end.